Cineboys to Cinemen, episode 7.
Hello.
Hello there. Pancake Day at the time of recording today.
Absolutely.
So happy belated Pancake Day.
Yes. Unless I somehow get this edited like as I get home.
yeah, you better.
Yeah.
Welcome to another episode. Today we are going to be talking about Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania.
Yes.
I still struggle with the title. It's such a dreadful title. But
yeah, it's not great.
Marvel's opening film for Phase 5.
Yeah. Is it Phase 5?
Phase 5, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Taking their cinematic behemoth into territory anew. We'll be talking about that alongside a discussion about Disney, because we alluded a couple of episodes ago to wanting to discuss that, and this felt like the perfect opportunity, as obviously Disney own Marvel. And then we'll discuss Marvel also, as why not?
Yeah.
As it's something that we've sort of swerved around, dipped our toes in a little bit, but we wanted to do at least one episode where we sort of meet it head on.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the film, as mentioned earlier, will be... I think, given the nature of the film, it'll probably be the smallest part of the discussion. I'm just so numb to the film.
I don't think I have a lot to say about it, so it's probably best to keep it
Short and sweet.
short and sweet.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Brisk.
it'll just be repeating ourselves quite a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you're sort of getting a tone maybe that we're not as keen on the film, but we'll save that for the main chunk of the discussion.
Yeah.
But sit back, relax. Again, another pretty lengthy episode,
Yeah.
and let us take you on a journey.
A cinematic journey into the quantum realm, as it were.
As it were. Right.
Questing the cinematic void.
So then, as promised, a Disney discussion.
Yes.
I think it's important to sort of acknowledge the first part of that Disney's popularity, which would be really difficult to ignore, is the nostalgia element. Obviously, we talked about that already in a previous episode. I know that at some points throughout the discussion, it's inevitably going to come up.
Yeah.
Because it's, as we discussed previously, a huge part of the reason why it is so popular.
Yeah.
But I think for the benefit of this discussion and sort of driving it into fresh territory, I'm going to try and avoid it as much as possible.
Okay.
As much as is feasibly possible.
Yeah. We talk about nostalgia a lot, but it always seems to come up. But there's a reason for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sign of the time, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, we say this pretty much every episode, that it is just the sort of the main attraction of the moment, I think, alongside superhero films.
Yeah.
And these big genre films. Most of it is born out of nostalgia, isn't it? So it makes sense to mention it, but I think for the sake of the episode, we'll try and steer away. With that in mind, I'm going to take a sort of wild stab in the dark at trying to pinpoint the reason for Disney's success in terms of their cinematic output, whilst avoiding nostalgia. And I think a large portion of it is down to the way Disney films present a simplistic view of morality.
Okay.
So, for example, the vast majority of Disney film characters, good and bad, are distinctively good and bad.
Yeah. Okay. I agree.
So there isn't really a lot of grey.
No.
There's no grey areas, between them. You've got the distinctly evil characters, the distinctly good characters, and it's their conflict in which we see the best and worst of both. Yeah?
Yeah.
And then, of course, there are some narrative arcs where the characters, display unfavourable traits such as greed and envy. But these sort of are packaged within a journey of like some kind of moral reawakening that tends to sort of resolve itself the moment that character is exposed to sort of prolonged periods of decency. They change their ways for the better, and then thus can sort of undo a great evil that faces them, or indeed become the better person forever.
Yeah.
Right.
Literally happily ever after.
Yeah, and that leads on to the next point, is that there's always a suggestion in it, sort of after the sort of the climax of every Disney film, that after this evil or personal difficulty has been assailed and conquered, there is no suggestion there will be any further strife or difficulty at all.
Yeah.
All of the strife or difficulty is contained within this
yeah.
narrative, and that's it. They'll be happy forever now, because this is the point they've beaten it and it's done.
Yeah, okay.
So that simplicity, I think, is a huge part of the reason why it's popular. And I think it's more popular when we consider that for many people, and certainly within the realms of mainstream entertainment, film is escapism, or film as escapism.
Yeah.
It lends itself really well to that idea, because at the end of the day, if you want to escape into a world of moral absolutes, Disney is probably the best place to go. Yeah?
Yeah.
All of the complexities and the muddy, shitty stuff of real life,
Yeah.
you can forget that, because there is none of that. There is no complexity in the sort of human beings, or indeed the characters, be it lions or fucking elephants or clownfish or whatever, you know. And I think that speaks to Disney's popularity, that people can escape into these worlds. They can see the most sort of upfront, face value versions of good and bad. They can see the most upfront version of someone becoming better and riding off into the sunset as a result. And I think that's a huge part of the reason for its popularity. And again, that's not necessarily a criticism.
No.
I'm not saying that every film we consume should make you feel shit about the world around you.
No.
But I think that if your true intention is to escape, is to get into a world and escape, then Disney will provide that for you. And I think that is a huge part of the reason why.
Okay.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's funny you mentioned that, because a lot of certainly their earlier work was harvested from the Grimm tales. So, and they're if you read them, they're like cautionary tales. Yeah. And they're actually a little bit, they are about, you know, it's not about you becoming a better person, it's what not to do.
Yeah,
and it's funny that they've taken that concept and removed the cautionary bit and introduced, like you say, this kind of very easily digestible representation of good and evil.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's black or it's white. And the darkness will get defeated, and they can kind of live their life happily ever after.
Yeah.
And it's just it's definitely it is one of the reasons why they, you know, their appeal is a lack of complexity and embracing a very traditional, very simple way of storytelling that can be watched by people as young as 3 to as old as 65, maybe even older than that.
It's a broad yet specific age range. No, I agree. That is the universal appeal, isn't it? And we're going to talk a bit more about that shortly, about the sort of nature of making something universally appealing. Yeah. But I think one of the ways you do that is, like you say, by simplifying morality. Yeah. In the characters, it's about making these parables as digestible as possible. Yeah, and it's actually, I didn't think I was going to talk about this film, but it's one of the things that Shrek takes the piss out of. Oh, really? I think because the whole idea is he's an ogre, right? He's traditionally the bad guy. Right, okay. And I know it's odd, but that film really shits on Disney, and it is, you know, it seems weird to analyse Shrek no,
so early on.
We're all for it.
But that film is a lot more complex than Good and Bad, and it's almost it's sort of ripping the shit out of Disney and how they simplify everything. In some ways, I mean, the franchise has gone arguably stooped lower now, but the first one and possibly even the second one, I feel, do that quite well. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's been so long since I've seen them. From my sort of pulling the small bits of memory I have about the film, I can sort of see where you're coming from. We got the dragon. Turns out to be, you know, starts out as something they run away from, and then there's something that's slightly complex that happens with that. Okay. And the whole thing of, you know, the princess starts off beautiful and ends up, you know, in the traditional sense, she's very attractive for a 2001 computer-generated character, and ends up an ogre. So it's there you go. Anyway, no, interesting thought. I like that because I think if there's anyone you're going to lampoon if you're making, you know, or animated fantasy films, it's going to be Disney, isn't it? Because they set the benchmark. Oh God, yeah. And I think that's, I don't know, like I feel that's such a huge part of it. And again, that's not a criticism necessarily. However, I will ask, do you think indulging in that sort of over sentimentality and simplistic morality, I guess, is do you think that can have a negative impact on the viewer if you sort of, like I said, overindulge? Over time, yes. You know, a 3-year-old isn't going to be interested in the complex morals of any character. And so it's fine to indulge in that simple way of storytelling, but over time, if you keep doing it, which they have, it's going to become a problem. For a start, the 3-year-old's going to grow up and rewatch it again and again and again, and then their other output is going to be naturally more attractive to them, and they're going to watch that again. And it's the same thing. There's only so many stories that can be told which don't inhabit a moral grey area. There just isn't. And it becomes, I think, sort of, from an audience standpoint, very troublesome, and also it doesn't teach you a lot about the world.
No,
does it? I mean, it doesn't. It suggests, for one thing, it suggests that at 25 years old you're going to find someone handsome who's going to sweep you off your feet and marry you, and you're going to be happy for the rest of your life. That, unfortunately, isn't the way life works.
No.
I do think it's troubling in that aspect.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I obviously, like, if you set the stall out for the film for whoever it is you're watching and say, look, it's just fucking escapism. And I guess, again, in my opening sort of remarks, if I may, I have no issue with wanting to escape. I mean, so many of the films I love, I mean, yeah, it's about getting away from it. But,
oh, yeah.
I mean, I just think that there's this sort of, particularly with our generation, there's this sort of, I don't know, some sort of Disney complex. I don't know, like, I find it a bit strange when people are really into it, you know? And I just think that, at what point did you realise that it wasn't going to be like that? If you don't engage with anything else actively, and it's just Disney, because it is that sort of desire to move away from the fucking muddiness of it all. I don't know. I mean, I think it might sound a little bit apocalyptic and over the top to say that it's completely damaging, but I think if you prescribe to the idea that the culture you consume will shape your relationship to your immediate environment, then I think the overconsumption of this sort of sappy, sanitized, simplified way of viewing people and the world probably will be damaging. And I think, if I think about like a film company or a sort of animated film company that gets sort of close to the popularity of Disney, that I can use for sort of reference, it's Studio Ghibli.
Okay.
And the reason I want to mention them is because I think they work quite interestingly, not only because, as mentioned literally seconds ago, they're probably the two of the most dominant and instantly recognisable animation companies on the planet.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
They both have quite different ways of handling the sort of fantastical nature of their content. I find that whilst Disney will present, you know, obviously there's lots to be said about how we view some of their narratives through the modern lens, but I think generally speaking, there's largely a positive message in Disney films. I mean, I think there's lots of troubling areas that a lot of people have written and spoke about, and I'm not going to disregard that, but I think the intention at least is to have these sort of positive messages laced within these sort of simplistic narratives.
Yeah.
Where I think Studio Ghibli is better, actually vastly superior, as far as I'm concerned, this is where I get a bit...
Studio Ghibli?
I make that noise a lot. I realised we were listening back to the last episode, not to sound like some narcissistic little fucking loser, but I realised that I make the noise quite a lot.
I love it. I can't get enough.
You just sort of don't realise until you sort of listen back to the episodes for editing purposes. Anyway, I think that they just handle those sort of tales of morality in so much more of an interesting way. Like if you take something like Kiki's Delivery Service, which on the face of it is, you know, it's just about a young witch flying around on a broom delivering stuff in some sort of fantasy world, but it's made to look, I don't know, the world is kind of like strangely relatable because the characters are all dealing with different things and dealing with really personal human things. And the sort of revelations that Kiki has throughout the film are small, tiny little revelations. And I don't know, I think that just speaks to the experience of life more. Whilst being a fantasy film, whilst being emotionally sweeping and really impactful. So I think I think what Studio Ghibli does for me is show, what it did for me was it showed me that you can make films of this ilk and not have to sort of be that simple. I mean, and again, they can make films like Princess Mononoke and Nausicaa, I think, probably bastardising that, Valley of the Wind. They can make films that have these grand statements about the need to sort of protect the environment and the sort of consequences of human greed and violence. I mean, violence is such a reoccurring theme in the work of Studio Ghibli. And the fear of it, and technology, weaponized technology. But whilst these moments in the film are harrowing, there's still this sense, this identity of like hope and these sort of sweeping, grand, emotional moments that really take you.
Yeah.
So I just think there is you can definitely do that. And I just think really it just shows that, I don't know, it made me think at that point that I sort of fell out of love with Disney anyway. At a certain age, I can't really pinpoint when it was, but it was watching those films that made me really think, fucking hell, like you can really do that and then some, and not have to necessarily just have this sort of
not have your kind of plot beats so defined.
Yeah. That's probably a better way of saying
it. Just in the sense that, like if you want to represent life, especially if you want to kind of portray life to a younger audience and get them ready for potentially dark moments, then you've got to be relatively realistic. You have to present the idea that it's not going to be about grand statements. It's going to be about small steps
that, when we look back on it, mean something and will have an impact. Because, sorry, I just sort of interrupted you there, but
sorry,
the idea that, I think we've said this before about life being a series of huge landmark moments. It's just bollocks. Most of the things that will have a formative impact on your life will be the quiet things that you reflect on when you're older. I think we mentioned that before when we were talking about that in relation to Linklater and his portrayal of adolescence.
That's it.
I just think it speaks more here. And I know there are a lot of people, when I've had this debate, and I've mentioned this, because I have this kind of debate a lot, because I'm one of those people who go, Disney, No, look, I still, you can still obviously like it. I'm not saying that. But when I've had this debate, people have this sort of immediately reject the idea of watching Studio Ghibli on the basis it's anime.
Okay.
And it's like, I'm funny. I'm not being funny, but like, first off, I want to say a point I remember our dear friend Dan saying.
Yeah.
He said, anime is like everything else, there's some good stuff there, you just got to sift through the shit.
Yeah.
It's the same with every sort of medium.
Interesting.
And secondly, you're prepared to watch a film with dancing fucking teapots and shit in it. Like,
I know.
You can't act as some kind of fucking high ground, some sort of cultural high ground. Watch Studio Ghibli films anyway. Not necessarily to compare them to Disney in the same way losers like me do, but just to fucking enjoy them like you should do. They're brilliant.
Yeah, so something new as well, If you enjoy that kind of Disney formula and the visuals as well, which are they're very different in Ghibli films. I think I don't think they're better. I just think they're really different and more beautiful in some aspects. And if you're watching Beauty and the Beast or Snow White every other weekend, then it might be something new that is just a bit refreshing, perhaps. And a bit slightly more challenging. Obviously, if you're not used to watching films with subtitles, then it'd be a good in for just something else. And that's not to say that you can't discard your previous sort of love for those other films at all. It's just it's a good stepping stone.
I think so. I mean, I was weirdly a bit of a late bloomer to those films, because I think again, for our generation, it's like a lot of people have so much reverence for Studio Ghibli. And I remember it not being till at least 3 or 4 years ago that I really sat and ate through a significant chunk of the big hitters.
Okay.
And I was like, fucking hell, there's a reason why some people love these. I think it was because of Disney that I didn't want to, because I sort of was just
the DVDs were like 20 quid.
Yeah, they still are.
Yeah.
The Blu-rays are really expensive.
God. Yeah, I remember trying to find Spirited Away and I had like £16 in my pocket. I couldn't get it. I was really gutted because someone had recommended it to me. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's an interesting point, and it's sort of gone off on a bit of a tangent there, but I think that presentation of morality, I think, is central to it. At least viewed through the lens of escapism. Did you have any thoughts on other areas that we could attribute Disney's success to?
Well, I mean, they actually... I was reading about it last night. They haven't always been that successful. So the early start, it took a long time to get off the ground. So, in sort of wartime era, we kind of see Disney today as this massively successful conglomerate.
Yeah.
It really wasn't always that way. Like, they struggled. Even after some big hits, they struggled for a really long time. So I think they've refined their formula for better or worse. And because they've been around for quite a long time. Longer than... I want to say longer than Warner Brothers, or maybe around the same time. And so over time they've cultivated a winning formula, or what they see as a winning formula. And success takes time, and it's trial and error. And I think they've got through most of the error in some aspects.
Yeah. I think the nostalgia element, look, we said we wouldn't, but
yeah,
I mean, that's a huge part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, the re-releases, the fact that their DVDs cost about 20 quid. If a child wants to see a Disney film, fucking parents have to go and as well. pay for the ticket. So
Yeah,
you're getting
yeah.
3 times the amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an IMAX thing, isn't it? Like you pay £25 for an IMAX ticket as opposed to a tenner for normal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another way of making money. Really,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
might
yeah.
not necessarily. You think about box office gross being people seeing it, and it's not that, it's the price. If you're like younger than 10, you can't really go and see a film on your own. So that, a very basic reason why they might have
Agreed, yeah.
had some success.
Absolutely. I think characterization's a big thing as well. I think they undoubtedly have repeatedly nailed the design of princesses, various other characters across their sort of long history, and the fact these characters are ridiculously marketable.
And
the toy market, obviously, for them is hugely lucrative. I mean, there's not many film studios that can attest to not only having theme parks built for them, but shops. The Disney Store was like a big fucking deal when you were a kid, right? I remember there was one in Derby, and it was like the most magic for a kid. You fucking walk in like you've just been in fucking Adams or in Boots, getting dragged around by your mum.
She
might take you into the Disney Store just to sort of placate the fact that you've just been watching a Tri-Foundation on for 45 minutes. You're like a 6-year-old kid. Like, what the fuck am I doing here? I just want to go to McDonald's. But those shops were huge, and they had such a big. I think formative might be a sort of stronger word to use, but it has a huge presence in me, even to the point now, as a sort of 32-year-old adult that doesn't really have a great deal of reverence for Disney anymore, when I walk past where that shop used to be, I get a pang of sadness.
Oh wow, okay.
Which is testament, I think, to their ability to not only sort of sink their claws into your childhood, but also not just via the screen, but via the toys you had, and the sort of the merchandising and the sort of omnipresence of Disney that seemed to sort of permeate throughout most of our childhoods.
I mean, Walt Disney, I can't exactly remember when it was, but he stopped. He took a back seat with the films to start the theme parks.
Oh yeah,
and he made like 6 or 7 different companies to make it happen as well. It's weird. But so he always had something in mind which was bigger than just films and animation. He always had an empire in mind, and I think. Fast forwarding from then about 50 odd years, you have The Lion King, which made about $950 million at the box office, but apparently that's nothing compared to the ancillary revenues that they got from toys and merchandise, and it was something like the gross of the film was something like 20% of the entire amount of money made into the stage play as well. I don't think that's actually. I think they sold the rights off to a West End theatre company or something, but. That's money in their pocket still.
Yeah. And the continual reminder of it as well. The theatre production has been going on for as long as I can remember, and still draws in the big crowds, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. It's got a life. It's got a real shelf life.
Yeah.
And it's something that just popped into my head now, really, really quickly. The stories are kind of timeless, and I don't necessarily mean that in a lavishing them with praise. But they are stories. They're like campfire stories, right? They don't have the baggage of being in any cultural context. You can tell them and retell them time and time again, and you can change the. You
can literally change the culture around it.
Around
those stories.
You can change the gender of the characters. You can change even their race and where they're where they hail from and all that kind of stuff. And the story's still there, You couldn't do that with Goodfellas, could you?
No, that's true. No,
interesting.
I like that. That's an interesting point. I think it's madness. I mean, because there was that period, in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. Oh no, actually, the Toy Story came out in 94.
95.
Fuck, I knew it. I knew you'd know.
I hope I'm right.
No, I think you are. Although I got it wrong, but I think you are. Obviously Pixar came along and I think really gave them the boot up the arse they needed.
Yes.
And for a time, that was the sort of darling of Disney. I remember there were pictures, industry analysis magazines would have pictures of Buzz Lightyear kicking Mickey up the arse and stuff, because, I think that method of animation and that approach to storytelling gave them the revamp they needed.
Ultimately.
And for a long time, it was for someone like me who had sort of stopped watching Disney really, Not that, not when I was 4 or 5, obviously, but like when you look back at that period, you think Pixar are the ones that really picked them up, I guess, and pushed them into for a new generation.
Well, I mean, you had Lion King in '94, and then Toy Story came along in '95, and then later on, I mean, if you look at Disney's output in the '90s, there's some good. I say good. There's some successful stuff in there.
Yeah,
but you also had films like The Emperor's New Groove.
Oh yeah,
which was like kind of it fucking lost money.
Like
really
right,
did.
okay.
And then all the while Pixar were doing like A Bug's Life, and onto sort of Finding Nemo and all that kind of stuff, which were. I mean, they still carry that model a little bit.
100%.
But
they 100%.
They were rising in the ranks.
Yeah.
And Disney were in trouble at that time, and I mean, I bought them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like it was a new technology to wrap the tried and tested storytelling formula around, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason. And it's funny to think now that Pixar, who the company that you would look to for that kind of innovation, are very much like Disney, who own them.
Yeah,
are just concerned more with sequels now.
I know. Yeah, they've really. I don't know what's happening to them. I mean, they do. I think
Toy
the
Story
last
5 is supposed to be coming out. I mean, fucking let it die.
I think the last really good film they made was probably Inside Out, because that was fairly recently, but it was the last like genuinely original film they made, and it's a shame. Because I thought they had more in them.
I think it just goes to show, doesn't it, that that I think when you create this landscape and create such reverence, this is what I find so weird about Disney's dominance now. I mean, we're going to talk about it more broadly in the context of Lucasfilm and Marvel, etc. later in the discussion. But I think the idea that they establish these moments in our childhood, these formative cultural moments in our childhood, both with the sort of films like Lion King and all that sort of shit, and then they take the leap with Pixar and continue to do so. So they've established that, and now they're making money off that again with sequels. They're almost like resurrecting it over and over again, and it's almost like just a loop, like an endless, like a feedback loop, isn't it? Feedback loop, is that
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So and it's just, I don't know, it just seems like endless, and I just don't know when it ends. I mean, my sort of cursory research, we do research. There were a lot of people who were critical of that approach, were saying, well, where does that leave room for sort of innovation? If all you're doing is sort of going, look at this, look back, remember this? Where does that leave room for like new properties? And new properties are undeniably more expensive to make.
Yeah,
right? You have
risky,
to develop that and design, and it's risky because even Disney, who have got a fucking sort of exhaustive back catalogue of bankable hits, bankable characters.
Yeah,
they still fuck up. They still get things wrong. Like, sometimes it just won't chime with the audience or the ear or whatever.
Yeah.
So obviously and I think what's happening, and I think this is happening with Marvel as well, and as indeed it showed with Ant-Man, is that they're just sort of playing it so safe because they don't want to take that risk.
Yeah.
And what is the impact culturally of not taking risks? What does that say about the industry, us as consumers, and where's that going to leave us? Because inevitably, at some point, surely the nostalgia is going to dry up, and we're going to thirst for something new. Surely, I mean, hopefully, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah. The only thing that slightly worries me about that is the fact that we get older, and then a new generation come along who haven't seen this stuff, and and like you say, the feedback loop continues. There's a great bit in it's a bit of a tangent. Apologies.
No, go for it.
But it does sort of ring true as to what we're talking about. There's a great bit in we're both big fans of Alan Partridge.
Oh yeah.
And there's a bit where he's having a meeting with like the chief commissioning editor of the BBC, and he says to him, Shoestring, Taggart, Spender, Bergerac, Morse, what does that say to you about regional detective series? And then he just goes, there are too many of them. And he goes, that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is people like them, let's make some more of them. And it's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. Can I just say props to squeezing it, legitimately managing to fit an Alan Partridge quote, like a prolonged.
Yeah. It's quite a big one.
Yeah, and in a way that feels contextual and actually merited. So props to you.
Thanks. No, but yeah, I agree with you. I think it's troubling, and I'm sick of it. I personally am just really, really sick of it.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, we say this every episode.
Yeah.
We said, we're not going to talk about nostalgia, but like, I'm sick of it. I'm fucking done, man. Like, I'm getting to the point where it's annoying me that people are getting excited about it, which I know is completely irrational and completely unfair, because I don't want to be that person who goes, I can't believe you're excited about it, and just look like, because it's worth pointing out, and I think we might probably have to do this again for the discussion around Marvel, that we don't want to be people that fucking make people feel shit for liking stuff.
No.
And when we're frustrated about it,
yeah,
and it bothers us, because obviously we have a vested interest in the medium, and we want to see newer ideas, not just in the independent scene, but mainstream cinema as well.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are plenty of people who share that view, but also like nostalgia.
Yeah.
So in cultural nostalgia. But I think it's important to acknowledge that, there is this sort of, you get a little sort of tingle in the genitals because you think you're clever because you're sort of laying into $1 billion conglomerate. But, however, I will continue to do so because I like the tingle. I haven't had a feeling down there in years. No. But you know what I mean? I don't know. Like, I just feel like we have to sort of preface it with that, or sort of bookend it with that in a sense, because, just it doesn't necessarily mean that we're right in any way.
No, it's funny. I still love, to this day, I love the original Lion King.
I remember you saying,
I still do, and
I remember you saying that quite. What episode was that?
That was the first one, I think.
Was it?
Yeah.
Shit, man. Okay.
Yeah, and
memories,
nostalgia.
Oh
God.
Fuck.
No, I just I have quite sort of strong opinions of that, and I do think that film is about responsibility and weirdly about sort of like being a dad and kind of running away from your problems won't fix anything, and that's on the whole a good moral message. It still suffers from that sort of black and white character issue that we were talking about earlier, and it's odd to me that whilst we were kind of laying into Disney a bit, I kept thinking about The Lion King. Hey, Ben, you like that? Don't forget that. But then the remake came out, and again, we've already discussed this, but it was so the same but so different at the same time. I was like, and that was when I watched that. It was on Netflix for a bit. Oh no, it was on Disney Plus, and I watched it. I've got Disney Plus, by the way. And yeah, that was when it really hit home. I was like, they need to stop doing this, because they're ruining. They're even taking things that won me over and ripping it away from me, and it was really upsetting. So yeah. I don't know. There you go.
Yeah, it's perhaps more complex than we initially gave it credit for, that debate, but I still feel like I can't handle it, and it does my head in, and I'm going to keep moaning about it.
Yeah.
So fuck you lot.
For 2.5 hours.
Yeah. We're getting longer each episode. So I think that means we can really just sort of effortlessly glide into a discussion about Marvel. As for
Nice.
the uninitiated viewer, Marvel is owned by Disney.
Yeah.
I would argue that a large sort of cluster of those criticisms that we have probably still apply to Marvel.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Before I get into this sort of another sort of perhaps more familiar tirade about it, I will say that for a long time I was pretty unbothered by the criticism towards Marvel films, because I was someone in my sort of teen years that really, really liked superheroes. I was really enamoured by superhero narratives and mythology. I collected the comic books. No, I wasn't the kind of person that had like fucking reams and reams of comic books. Like,
yeah.
But like I was into them. I really liked, like the ground level superheroes of Marvel. I really liked the sort of like sprawling, ridiculous sort of mythology of DC. And so when these films first started happening, there was no negativity. I think not just from me, but from a lot of people, because no one really knew. When you saw the Hulk, and then obviously Iron Man's when it really kicked off, really. Yeah. But you had no sort of idea that this would be where it is now.
No, God.
So I think
it felt fresh, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. And even for the longest time, I mean, I would go and watch each MCU film, and I was so totally aware that this was problematic in so many ways, not just for blockbuster cinema, but for the industry. But I sort of could ignore it. But the more I watched the films, and the longer they went on, and the more the films came out, I just found myself thinking, it's getting harder and harder to ignore the problems every time.
Interesting.
And because I know that you've always had quite a negative view of them. Not necessarily negative, but you've always been... I guess you've been guarded about the idea of being swept up by them. Would that be like a more fair assessment?
I think so, yeah. And I think partly the reason for that is I never read comics, ever. So I never had any love for the characters. I didn't know who the majority of them were. I still went and saw the films and I kind of enjoyed them, but my introduction to superheroes was through Spider-Man. Like the original Spider-Man.
Yeah. It's worth pointing out that obviously superhero films didn't just start the MCU. Of course, there are plenty of other great superhero films.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Before that,
so I didn't have my introduction was slightly different. I think I realised quite early on that this was going like somewhere without a conclusion, basically. Which I think, if you're telling a story, you have to have a fucking ending. You just have to. I love a good ending, and I love a kind of full resolution to a story, and the fact that they were just doing nothing but branching out was like, oh god, okay. And you said this last week. You said to me that you have to do your homework with these films now, and my interest was just was lost. And at the same time, like, you know, the Nolan Batman films were sort of taking off, and I was like, no, these have endings, right? This has like a conclusion, and I was more taken away by those, really.
Yeah, I think it's funny because, like, obviously the superhero, or particularly the MCU, has had an impact on comic books. Like, more people read comic books. Like, it's socially acceptable to do that now.
Yeah,
I think in our generation, you were sort of laughed at, weren't you?
Hell. Yeah. It was. You were confined to, you know, before being a nerd was cool, basically.
Yeah.
And there was that stereotype of coming in with a cold and big glasses on all the time. Just getting out your comics, and you sit in the corner on your own. And that's just not the case anymore.
No. But I would argue, weirdly, that it's actually done the comic book medium a disservice, these films. I think they've made comic books more childish.
Oh, really? Yeah.
That might be something that not a lot of people would like to hear, but I just feel that, like, it's made the medium look like it's only palatable for a certain age group.
Do you think that's to the extent that graphic novels had to distinguish themselves from comic books by calling themselves graphic novels?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, they were just like a group of, like, fucking, like, nutters who were writing these brutal comic books who were just like, no, we're going to call them graphic novels now because we don't want to be associated with these losers. So it's almost creating its own sort of brand of elitism, isn't it? I just felt it was important to preface it with that, because I don't want people to think that I'm just going to start ragging on them because I don't like them. Like, I up until is it Endgame was the last one of that sort of big. Yeah, I was not necessarily like always along for the ride and wasn't like impassioned. Like, I wouldn't have like nailed myself to the cross for the films, but I always sort of half enjoyed them and accepted them for what they were. But it's become harder for me to do that now.
See, I liked Endgame because it was an ending. Yeah. It was a fucking good ending.
Yeah.
And now they're making more, and it's just like, oh, why? No, you had a good thing there. You had, for a brief time, it was the highest grossing film ever. And you wrapped it up so beautifully. You had that nice song at the end with Captain America dancing. I was like, that is how you end the Avengers. Right there. Yeah. And they announced more. I was like, no, you've called it Endgame. What are you doing? Anyway, I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But
before we sort of move into a discussion about certain films, I guess we have to address the elephant in the room. And that elephant is a small Italian-American man. Called Martin Scorsese, who obviously had some comments about superhero films. He's not the only person, and I'm sure there have been many film podcasts and discussions about this before us, long before us. But I feel like it feels important to mention that, and the views of lots of the filmmakers who have been far more scathing than Scorsese was about the state of modern cinema. But he suggested that these films weren't cinema in the sense that they were more like a roller coaster ride. What's your take on that? Because that seemed to get a lot of people who liked Marvel films fucking furious. Yeah. More so than like someone like Ken Loach saying that there is as much value as a fucking hamburger. I'm paraphrasing him, but he was far more scathing. Shit.
He was quite lengthy as well. Ken Loach,
But what is it, do you think, about Scorsese's assessment that riled some people up? And then what is your view?
You know, for the average audience member or cinema goer, it was acceptable to like both, right? So you could go out and watch a Scorsese film and enjoy it, and you could also go out and watch a Marvel film and enjoy it. But then as soon as one of the creators of one of those things that you would love calls out the other one, just because of like how prestigious he is, even though I don't think he meant what everyone thought he meant. He didn't. He wasn't knocking theme parks, right? He wasn't saying they were a bad thing. He was just saying that's kind of how he saw them. But there was a big a separation there, and it made a lot of people upset because films that they previously might have enjoyed, all of a sudden that person is expressing, in their eyes, discontent for the other things they enjoy. So it kind of created an internal conflict amongst many people, and it led them to sort of lash out a bit. But I kind of went off a little bit there, but I don't think he meant ill by it at all.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it was just something that taken out of context a little bit, and he just, all he wanted to say was they're kind of easy stimulation, which they are.
Yeah.
And people kind of took that as him shitting all over them, which I don't think he was at all. He probably isn't going to go and see them, but that's not his thing, and that's fine. It's opinions and it's tastes, and that was all he was expressing. But yeah, what about you?
I completely agree with him. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't agree with him on the basis that, like with everything, you can read into films on a very deep level and try and work out how various aspects of their narratives are linked to other films or ideas or themes of a certain time. And I think Marvel has done that to a certain degree, and to varying successes. I think when we talk about some of our sort of more favourite examples, if we can use the word favourite, but the examples we sort of like a little more than the rest of the fodder.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that is based on those films that have been a bit more successful with that. So I'm not saying that they can't strike a chord in that manner, but I think largely it is all about entertainment. It is all about getting bums on seats. I mean, and let's be upfront here. Like, Marvel's approach isn't. It's just a more refined version of a blockbuster formula that has always existed. I mean, since the inception of cinema, it's been about entertaining people.
Yeah.
And I know we might have sort of like a sort of Chazelle-like reverence for the Roaring 20s and 30s, in a way that makes us think that those films were better. And obviously, for many reasons, they probably are. But as the medium has got older, the way in which entertaining as many people as possible has happened is by refining that formula, refining that approach.
Yeah.
And basically, the way I would view it is that it's about taking the most accessible aspects of every genre and sort of putting them together.
Yeah.
That's sort of what the blockbuster model is. It's about having the peril, the sort of vague element of horror, the romance, the action. It's about combining all these themes.
The final battle, right?
Yeah. It's about combining all these themes within a simple narrative structure that makes sense for the average cinema goer, whilst also appeasing every single member of the family that would go and watch the film.
Yeah.
So Marvel's approach is a more refined version of that to suit the world they've created. I think they deserve some degree of credit for managing to do that, because there have been so many other film companies that have been inspired by Marvel's dominance and have tried to do the same and completely fluffed it.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's something that's necessarily an easy thing to do.
No.
But I would argue that maybe Marvel's reason for that is they were the first to do it. So that they could compare themselves to nobody, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's worth pointing that out. However, I think where with Marvel it gets more tiresome for me than it would be for sort of any other sort of blockbuster is that the way their films are structured, in the sense that it's always about the next film. We were sort of talking about this on the journey back yesterday from the film. Every one of their films is like a propulsive self-marketing device. So the films will market themselves in a way that, before any of the fucking, in a way that I think is more effective than the advertising.
Yeah.
Because they're constantly looking forward. They're constantly saying, when's this character going to come? Or what's that Easter egg mean?
Yeah,
I mean, the fucking post-credit sequence is their thing. They created that. And that the whole point of that is to signpost audience sort of enthusiasm and excitement to the next film, the next phase, the next character. Who's going to play that character? What's going to happen to the new villain,
Yeah.
And it markets itself because you create speculation, you create interest. And I think that's part of the reason why not only is it so successful, but it has its detractors, because it doesn't seem content on settling within the narratives that it's working on at the time.
Yeah.
It's always looking forward in a way that almost disregards the importance and credibility of the stories that they're making.
Yeah. Did you ever watch Lost?
I remember, so it's like one of those shows. I'm infamously shit with TV, by the way, much to a lot of my mates' sort of fury, but I remember being swept up for a bit.
Yeah, so the thing they do, every single episode ends on a cliffhanger. I mean every single episode.
Okay.
And the reason for that is to get you excited for the next one, right? So it's exactly the same model. But the Lost has the luxury of being a television show, so you know there is going to be a next episode, and it doesn't mean there's not going to be an ending.
Yeah,
it's exactly the same feeling. Like, I mean, I didn't have that with the one. I didn't sort of feel that with Ant-Man, but I'm not as invested in the whole spiel of it all. But that's the idea. It's the TV show. It's the next week, right?
Yeah, the next film, the next character.
Yeah.
It markets itself. I mean, in a way, it's genius if you look at it from a sort of capitalist perspective. Not to get too political here, the capitalist perspective. But that it's a brilliant model, and it works. And if you're going to do it with any franchise, you do it with an exhaustive mythology, like the world of comic books, like Marvel. I don't know, but I think that's where their successes perhaps come from, is that approach to storytelling.
Do you think that the last ever MCU film will have a post-credit scene?
Will it? Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
interesting.
Maybe.
Well, we'll see.
It's just Kevin Feige just sat eating dinner on his own.
Yeah, in a massive house all by himself.
Yeah, then he just goes home and closes the door. You just hear a gunshot. And it just ends.
Love it. Well, I don't love it. But
yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah.
Kevin, here's my number is.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I just think I think that's a huge part of the reason. I also think it's casting. I think you've got to look at the casting choices they made, and you can't really argue with that.
No.
In terms of,
yeah, I mean they
pretty spot on, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's very. You can't argue with the casting directors, and well, I'm assuming Feige has a lot of involvement over the casting. But you have Thor. Like, who do you think of immediately? Like, the first person who pops into your head, and it's when you think of Thor, you think of Chris Hemsworth, right?
Yeah.
You don't think of the comic book incarnation.
No.
Same with Wolverine, actually. Although obviously Wolverine was pre-MCU. It's just Hugh Jackman, isn't it? That's who you think of.
Yeah.
They're extraordinarily good at casting, and I don't think they've really put a foot wrong, apart from maybe what's his name, the guy in the first Iron Man who they replaced with Don Cheadle.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember. Maybe that was a bit of a misstep, but anyway.
I mean, in terms of their core heroes,
yeah.
I mean, I always thought a CGI Bob Hoskins would have been a better Spider-Man, but that's just me.
In another dimension, maybe.
Well, they could do that now, can't they? I mean, if they could just sort of speak to the Hoskins estate and then get the rights. What a bizarre idea that is. I think that, and I think also, again, it sort of ties back, but they have really refined that balance of peril and humour really well. I mean, the humour, I think, is one of the things that's got progressively worse, and it wasn't that great when it started off.
No.
But it's just got worse and worse and worse, to the point it's just like...
It's just not funny anymore to me.
What did we coin it as last night? Was it sort of false irony or something?
Yes, that's what you said, yeah.
Just like this idea, it's all like, oh... this looks pretty bad. That sort of sense of humour. You know what I mean? It's like, but it's not going to be, because it's fucking Marvel.
It's the kind of humour that, maybe I'm being a bit cruel here, I won't name any names, but the kid in school who comes in and their sense of humour is just a few years younger than everyone else's, and they think they're being really funny, and and they always end like their jokes with almost like an exclamation mark, as if to say it's your cue to laugh now. But it's that kind of thing. It really grates on me. I really hate it. And I could tolerate it for the first 10 odd years, but now, especially with Ant-Man, oh my god, I will talk about it more in a bit, but Jesus Christ, it just wasn't funny.
No, it wasn't at all. Given someone like Paul Rudd, who is so effortlessly charming. I mean, I'm not someone that has particular reverence for a lot of his output, but he just seems like quite a charming fella.
Yeah.
And a comedically gifted one to some degree. And
He's hilarious in like Judd Apatow's early films. He's
yeah,
genuinely
to be fair,
really
yeah,
good.
I can't really, yeah, I can see that. But I don't know. I just think it's strange. I also think the lack of peril. It's funny, isn't it, when you watch any kind of blockbuster film, you do have to surrender yourself to it in the sense that you know that it's never going to be that bad for any of the characters because it can't be.
Yep.
You're not going to see Iron Man get cleaved in two and his corpse molested by aliens because there are children in the fucking cinema.
Yeah, yeah.
So you know that even when they say we're going to kill off the heroes.
Yeah.
I remember there's that bit in is it Infinity War where Thanos stabbed Iron Man?
Yeah.
And I was like, fucking hell, if they kill him like this would be quite ballsy for Marvel.
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought, fuck, they're not going to, are they? And of course they didn't.
They didn't.
He was going to, spoilers if you haven't seen it. I mean, I guess you probably have, because most people in the world have seen the film, but obviously he dies in a much more heroic, sacrificial manner.
Yes.
Which I thought was always going to be the case. But that lack of peril again that speaks to the idea that you have to surrender a lot of your sort of inhibitions for blockbuster films, but people seem to do that with far more like enthusiasm for Marvel than any other franchise I can think of. I mean, how can you be consumed by any sort of emotion when you know everything's going to be okay because of marketing?
And also, I mean, it's the kind of Harry Potter problem, you know. If you write magic, if you set your story in a world that has magic in it, you don't have any.
I'm trying to take my sock off. Sorry, I'm getting hot.
Yeah.
I'm getting hot talking about superhero films. I'm going to take my fucking socks off. Sorry, Ben. Carry on.
That's all right. No, yeah, I was just saying, like, if you set your story in a world that has magic in it, you can write anything, any character out of any situation because there's magic in it.
Yeah.
And at the start, Iron Man, that was quite grounded. Like you say, he was still a ground level superhero, and his concern was civilians. It wasn't universes or worlds or multiverses or whatever. But then, as the stakes got higher and as they made more and more films and the stakes kind of climbed, the suspension of disbelief was just kind of withering.
Yeah, it's difficult. To accept it, wasn't it? Yeah, or to surrender to it, should I say?
Yeah, and a franchise like Harry Potter had the benefit of speaking to sort of one generation, and it didn't really matter because it was all about your love for the characters, and they could still die, and and with this, they're super beings, right? They even if they do die, and that's been proven with Infinity War and Endgame. Doesn't mean they're dead at all. Yeah. They can come back because time travel exists, and I really struggle to be enthralled and enticed by the stories because anything can happen. Yeah. And when anything can happen, nothing can happen.
Limitation is good, right? I think.
Yeah. Oh, big time.
And I think that leads nicely actually to our discussion about some of the MCU films we prefer.
Yes.
And I get the impression from our early discussions that it's that area of limitation that makes the ones we like better than the other ones.
Yeah.
Hit me with your three.
Okay, so on number one, this is a weird one. It's quite recent. I really enjoyed Spider-Man No Way Home.
Okay.
I don't know why. I think it might be because I love the original Spider-Man so much.
Yeah.
I went to see it because I think Spider-Man's probably my favourite superhero.
Okay, yeah. Fair enough.
I just thought I just have to watch it. Apparently it's really good. I knew by this point, spoilers, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire in it. I was like, I kind of have to see how they approach that. And although it did suffer from the same problems as a lot of the MCU's later output, there's something about the humanity of Spider-Man which and again, that speaks to what I was saying earlier about Harry Potter, is that even though the stakes are so ridiculously high and there's sci-fi elements and no one's ever really dead, he's got his relationship with MJ, and that kind of was enough for me. It was enough for me to be emotionally invested in him and his plight. And he could get kind of bashed around and kicked and almost be killed, but it didn't matter because I was rooting for them to, and I was rooting for him fighting with the other two Spider-Men, which I knew was going to happen. Again, that's a nostalgia thing, like the fact that there was the other two in there. So yeah, that's on my list. Sorry, I'll quickly go for the other two.
No, I'm enjoying it. It's a good,
Iron Man again.
It's in there for me as well.
Yeah. Just nice and grounded. Early MCU, early enough for it to feel fresh. Robert Downey Jr. I hadn't seen him in a lot, and so he was a real like pleasant surprise.
Mm-hmm.
It's not heavily computer generated, at least the first half. The bit in the cave is largely like practical, and that's, you know, I always appreciate that. I think that's really difficult, and it's a really bold move.
Yeah.
There was one scene which really I was like, okay, wow, that's fucking good acting. The bit where he's like, Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a bunch of scraps. I was like, who is that actor?
Jeff Bridges.
Jeff Bridges. Yeah, I was like, Jesus Christ, okay, I'm loving this. Yeah, just a decent MCU entry for me.
Yeah.
Third one quickly, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, okay. I didn't expect that for some reason.
Me neither.
I don't know why.
I thought about it last night, and I was like, you know what? I loved that film. It was kind of irreverent enough, and it had a wicked soundtrack, and which was unusual for Marvel. Marvel films, by and large, the music is shit. This wasn't. This had like songs in it, and I liked that about it. Anyway, I just thought it was. It's probably one of the funniest as well.
Yeah, I think it had enough sort of personality and attitude to it. I mean, I don't have particular reverence for it myself personally, but I think it had enough attitude in it to suggest that it was different enough to everything else.
Yeah,
and I agree with that. Really, that those choices.
What about you then, mate? What's your choices?
Well, I still agree with you. Now I'm going to give you completely different ones. No, I agree with you about Iron Man. Yeah. Fresh, new. I think there's a thematic area of thematic interest to it as well, about sort of
the weapons and stuff.
Yeah. Tony Stark sort of wrestling with the morality of his business and his family's legacy, and then turning into a weapon himself, which is contradictory. But I guess all superheroes, you have to rely on the morality of the superhero, don't you? You can't necessarily, you have to hope that he's good.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it sort of undoes the whole. Yeah. Well, it already is undone, but it undoes it further. But yeah, no, I like the first Iron Man. Again, we had no, as we alluded to at the start of the Marvel discussion, there was, you had no idea it was going to get that far. So at that point, it did feel fresh, and you weren't sort of scoffed at by people that wear tortoiseshell glasses and scarves in July for saying that you liked it.
Yeah.
My other choice would probably be Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
Okay, yeah.
Another film that had a vague thematic richness to it, which I quite liked. It obviously borrowed from...
It's a lot about politics of the United States, isn't it?
It's sort of like paranoia. It tried to resurrect that sort of Cold War paranoia, parallax view, all the president's men, and stuff it, albeit largely pretty crudely, into a superhero narrative, a Marvel superhero narrative. But I appreciated the intention. It did channel that energy a little bit. Yeah. Because I think, comic books by and large can channel the energy of the history quite well. Yeah. The film's attempt to at least do that, I thought, was somewhat commendable.
Oh, okay.
And then obviously it falls apart in an explosive third act, but what can you do? That's what you should expect. And then the third one would probably be Black Panther.
Okay. Yeah.
Again, I don't think it's a masterwork. I don't think it's a film that is in any way... Well, I think it is different in many ways, and I think but I don't think sort of structurally it is too different.
No.
As far as origin stories go, I know they had Black Panther in Civil War, so it wasn't his first sort of outing in the MCU, as it were. But I think what I admired most about him, Chadwick Boseman's portrayal, and I think the energy of the film, was obviously it was a huge cultural moment. Yeah. For obvious reasons.
The whole film is, so heavily concerned with culture.
Yeah, that's Afrofuturism and all that sort of stuff, and it's an incredibly empowering experience. And what I like about it as well is that within that is that it spoke to me for the first time, I think, since the MCU had started, about what the power of a superhero actually is, in the sense that it can inspire people and give people hope. Yeah. I remember I worked at a cinema for a long time and I'd see loads of kids all come in with that on, and I just thought, I don't know, like, it just felt more impactful than people dressing up as Batman, or you just got a sense that this character was really important to a lot of people. And I think, I don't know, it spoke to me as to the power of the superhero, because I think that's been watered down by the MCU substantially.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, they're my three picks.
Nice.
Yeah,
like it.
Yeah, so again, these aren't films. I'd never put them in like a top films list. I'd never say that they're my favourite films, but
don't get the Steelbook. Yeah.
No, certainly not. No, but I don't know. They're definitely worth trying to pick them out, because it's an interesting exercise, isn't it?
Oh man, yeah, I really enjoyed it,
and it works to a nice counterpoint to us sort of slagging it off the last fucking.
Yeah, you got to acknowledge that it's a little bit more complex than we were perhaps laying out at the beginning, and there's diamonds in the rough. And that's a good thing.
I think, again, if you think about the detractors and the dissenting voices that continue to grow as Marvel's popularity grows, is that, I think whilst a lot of their concerns are merited, and I think we've done a pretty good job of airing those criticisms out, but I think there's always going to be a degree of pomposity behind it that almost derails the credibility of that argument in the eyes of people that like it in many ways.
I mean, part of it was slightly Scorsese's fault, that sort of the idea of it being a pompous to dislike these films, because a lot of people viewed him as like I said before, sort of a prestigious filmmaker. Weirdly made Marvel difficult to criticise for a while. Yeah,
it's funny because I was reading a lot of articles about that. Obviously, that was a really big conversational point for a long time. And I remember reading this article, it's a debate between these two people, one of which was more sympathetic to Scorsese's views, the other person was Team Marvel all the way. But she was saying, well, it's a bit contradictory that he could say that when he has benefited from that same studio system.
Oh, okay.
Which is a sort of interesting argument, but I would still counter-argue that whilst every single fucking film, obviously the people who invest in that film want profit, Marvel films are far more concerned with profit than Martin Scorsese's films have ever been.
No, yeah.
I mean, obviously he needs profit to keep working as a filmmaker. I mean, you have to be honest with yourself about that.
Yeah.
And we're not on the cutting room floor or in the meetings with board members, so he might have made changes to facilitate that. Maybe early on in his career, I don't know. But I think it seems like a bit of a cheap swipe, I think.
Yeah.
I think you can still criticise something from within a system.
Yeah.
Certainly if you're someone like Scorsese that has created so many landmark moments. Quickly, before we move on to sort of talking more about Ant-Man, as we said, probably the shortest part of the discussion, no pun intended there actually. We thought we'd just discuss some non-MCU superhero films, because as we sort of alluded to earlier, there are obviously some superhero films that were around for a long time before this idea of one large interconnected sprawling universe, multimedia platform spanning multiverse shit,
weird stuff.
So we thought we'd knock off a couple of those. So Ben, lead.
All right,
please.
I'll say all three, shall I?
Go on.
First one, really like, I talked about this earlier, original Spider-Man, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, 2002. Got a big personal connection to this. It was the first film I remember coming out of, and I wanted to be that superhero. And I just think it translates from, I don't read comic books like I say, but it does have the feel of being light enough that it's a comic book, but dark enough that there's real stakes. It's got some really wicked performances in it, notably like Willem Dafoe, genius casting.
Macho Man Randy Savage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. Can't believe I forgot him.
Yeah. A career-defining performance.
Yeah. And it just, it was just, like I said, it introduced me to superheroes.
Yeah.
You have, are we think superheroes in general? Because if it's general superheroes, Batman Begins. Not enough people give that film the credit it deserves, because The Dark Knight came out and everyone thought it was so much better, which it is in a lot of respects. But Batman Begins is, of the three, the blockbuster. It is just the quintessential blockbuster. Like chef's kiss. It's got everything in it, and it's also morally complex. And Nolan, quite early Nolan, 2004 still.
Yeah.
So it's him flexing his muscles, and that's fascinating. And finally, you got to mention X-Men 2. Because it's, again, inhabits that kind of moral grey area. It has a lot to say about marginalised people, right?
Well,
so it treats the people with powers as something to be feared, or it doesn't treat them as something to be feared. It's they've been marginalised, right? They've been pushed to the fringes of society, and that explored that. Particularly the second one explored that really, really nicely, I thought.
Okay. Nice.
Shout out to Ang Lee's Hulk as well. I like it more than most people. I don't know why.
I sort of get where you come from with that. I don't know what it is about it. I don't know. It's just, it's been years since I've seen it, but I remember thinking this isn't as bad as everyone says it is.
Yeah, I went out, left the cinema, wanted to be Hulk.
Well, there we go.
So
it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you then, mate?
I'm going to echo all of them. No, the original, the original, the original Spider-Man.
Okay,
huge moment. I just
Yeah.
think it has everything that a superhero origin story should have in a film. I think it's perfect. The perfect origin story.
Definitely. Really good soundtrack. Danny Elfman sounds like a spider.
Yeah.
It just sounds like a spider, and I'm like, that's genius. Like,
It's sort of that kind of same level iconic as Danny Elfman's Batman theme.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Which would lead me to number 2, which is probably Tim Burton's Batman.
Tim Burton's Batman.
Yeah.
Oh shit, I didn't think of that.
What I like about it is peak Tim Burton. His ability to handle sort of darker themes in a way that's sort of silly.
Yeah,
It's silly. It's a really silly film, but it speaks more to the ideas, the more sort of palatable ideas of the Batman character, I think.
Yeah.
I like Nolan's Batman films. I don't hold them to as high regard as many people do.
Yeah.
I love the character. I'm not saying that the darker iterations don't work for me, but I just think the way Burton balances that darkness or offsets that darkness with goofiness works really well.
I think, The Dark Knight is a great song that's been overplayed, basically. I think it's been talked about too much. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I would just as a brief aside, I mean, I think I'm looking forward to actually talking about Nolan, because we've sort of talked about him a couple of times in this podcast, but it's one of his better films purely because it's not sort of wrapped up in itself like a lot of his films tend to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a little bit. It is constantly saying, look at this, Heat, but with Batman.
Yeah.
So I guess there's an element to it, but there's something simpler about it. But I don't dislike the film. But I just think Burton's version of that, to my mind, is probably the best version of the character on the screen that we've seen so far.
You looking forward to him coming back? Old Keaton? Or is it
I mean, who fucking knows, man? I mean, I think DC, we spoke about franchises that have tried to ape Marvel and failed miserably.
Yep.
I think DC have obviously are one of those. Not without their fans, but I know James Gunn. Obviously, you mentioned Guardians. He's like the new CEO of development at DC.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
He's like almost completely jumped ship. It's almost like Gunn's sacking and rehiring from Marvel's, or maybe like left a bad taste in his mouth. I don't know. I mean, he came back and directed Guardians 3, which remains to see how that was. I mean, I thought Guardians 2 was shite, so can't be any worse than that. But personally, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see where they take that. And I think the whole point of the Flash is it's going to sort of initiate that rebirth.
Yeah,
because they do that with DC. They'll just go, "Oh, let's make a new Justice League, get Flash to run backwards in time for a bit." Yeah, it has the same problems Marvel has about being able to like constantly sort of never fucking end anything.
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess with comic books, you can sort of forgive it for that. The comic books themselves, I mean.
Nice.
And I guess the third, I was sort of struggling, but I would say one of the Christopher Reeves Superman films.
Oh, yeah.
I think 2.
Yeah, definitely.
Just that sense of humour to them again. And I think Reeves is just fucking brilliant as Superman.
They got such charm.
I don't think he's been bettered.
No, I agree.
I mean, I thought Cavill was okay. I think he was just poorly utilised by Snyder.
Yeah.
And who else is there? Who's the Superman?
Tom Welling in Smallville.
Tom Welling in Smallville. Of course, we've got Dean Cain.
Oh yeah, okay.
Dean Cain. He was Superman, wasn't he? Dean Cain.
I can't remember which one.
With Terry Hatcher.
Oh, okay.
What's that called?
Bear with us. Oh yeah, in the TV series Lewis and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman.
There we go.
Yeah.
Actually, might be better than Christopher Reeve. No, not at all. And who was in? Did Bryan Singer do a Superman?
Oh yeah, Brandon Routh.
Yeah. Whatever. I mean, I don't think he was particularly bad, but not particularly memorable either.
No, I remember there being a good plane crash in it.
Didn't a bullet get squashed in his eye?
Yeah, that's right.
That's one of those scenes that sounds good on paper until you do it, and it looks fucking shit.
Yeah. It's just gross.
Yeah. So yeah, that would probably be my 3.
Nice, I like those.
And again, I stress that. I stress that I like the idea of superheroes, and I get frustrated with Marvel's handling of them.
Yeah,
because they have made him. I think they've made him a bit childish, but that's just my view. Finally, Ant-Man. On the subject of childish,
yes, Ant-Man plus the Wasp : Quantumania.
Yes, I'm going to come out swinging and say that I didn't like the film very much at all, on the basis that I don't know, they sort of Marvel posture about this sort of like the evolution of the storytelling formula that they've sort of cultivated over the last 20 or so years. Has it been 20 years? I think it might have been. I can't remember. Who cares?
Yeah, roughly.
Roughly?
Yeah.
But it just I think to me it says something more about the fact they're regressing. I think they've just... It's infantile. It's like, the design choices, the attempt to make me laugh. I mean, the opening monologue and closing monologue, it's like the bookend the film.
Yeah.
I'm going, I didn't get a lot about life. What the fuck's that about? Like,
oh, yeah.
It's just, like... And again, like, I know I go into a Marvel film, and I fucking, I even when I sort of half liked them, I took the critical hat off. I try to do that the same here, because I just think, you're not going to get, like, anything more than that theme park ride.
Yeah,
but like, even by those standards, I thought, fucking hell, like, this is poor. This is really poor. I mean, it's not like offensive, and we said that, didn't we? When we came out, it wouldn't anger me.
No,
and I saw some merit in it, but I just thought this. I don't know. This feels young, really young. This is pitched really low.
It did. It was going back to the design choices, and this has been kind of spoken about quite a lot already in the sort of critical consensus. But the Quantum Realm was really uninspired. It just looked like fucking Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or something. You know what I mean? There was nothing new to it, and they've got all these tools at their disposal and probably hundreds of people working on all these designs, and all they could think of was just a Star Wars bar and just glowing clouds in the distance. They didn't feel grounded in it either. I don't think the visual effects were bad, but I think the fact that we were saying yesterday, it kind of felt like it was shot in a cupboard a little bit. And you can tell it just they just clearly not reacting to anything, and that fell flat. And once you take that away from, certainly when you take that away from me, like, it's hard. You better have a fucking good story there, and there wasn't one.
I mean, I remember right at the start of the rebirth of Send the Boys to Cinema, we spoke about the potential that this technology has. And it's just being wasted in these sort of cookie cutter design choices. I don't know, like. And it doesn't seem the Quantum Realm is supposed to be this place of madness, right? It's going to take the Marvel universe further away from whatever sort of remotely grounded ideals that it had. But like, the world that they're going into feels no different to like Guardians or any other worlds they've already built. Like, it looks exactly the fucking same. So like, I think there's something that's not necessarily just Marvel's fault. I mean, you think about like Inception, it's about dreams within a dream. All people dream about is fucking like cityscapes,
snowmobiles,
like, this is obviously a problem that is in wider blockbuster cinema, because if you go full fucking wacky, probably won't sell as many tickets. But I just think you have so much potential, and I think you're absolutely right. I think it completely spunks it up the wall.
I mean, just from a scientific point of view, briefly, I know these films are totally unconcerned with actual science, but like, if you were shrunk down to an infinitesimally small size, there wouldn't be any ground. Like, there wouldn't be anything for you to stand on, and they could have explored that notion. I think, like the fact there probably wouldn't be any gravity or anything. That would have been really interesting. They got the money to do it. They got the technology to do it. Why not try it? Like, that would be really visually interesting. So even if you can't be asked with a script, that doesn't matter. I'll still be there watching that and think, like, that was 2 hours of visual splendor, and they just, I don't know, they didn't do it. I wanted to also discuss Kang a little bit, because
one of the stronger elements of the film, maybe. Performance-wise,
performance by Jonathan Majors. It's been said he is rather good, but the character, what are his powers? Like, I never quite got that from the film. Like, what can he do and what can't he do? That's what defines a superhero and a villain, right? So you've got Superman, he can fly and he's impervious to bullets and stuff. You've got Spider-Man, who can shoot webs out, and Ant-Man can shrink. Like, what's his thing?
I think that's a bit strange, and I think we said, didn't we, before the post-credit sequence when the film ended, and we were saying, well, they've written themselves into a bit of a hole here, because spoilers, they seem to beat this guy pretty fucking quickly and pretty fucking easily. Given that this guy's supposed to be like the big bad that's going to come to sort of terrorize the next generation of the Avengers, and and then of course they write their way out of it with, as you mentioned, that sort of aforementioned sort of limitlessness that just allows them to sort of say, well, there's actually loads of versions of him.
Yeah.
And then there'll probably be some like interview with the writer who said, well, actually he was close to this star that made him weaker. Do you know what I mean? There'll be some fucking excuse, because they did that with Thanos, didn't they? I can't remember why was he weaker in the first film, the second film, and they had some sort of fucking throwaway excuse that in the context of the superhero world worked. And people bought, and it's like, well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. I guess, but I mean, and I guess you shouldn't really criticize it too much for that, because that's just the nature of the beast. But I don't know, I felt that having Ant-Man, look, I mean, I think he's quite a cool idea for a superhero, but he has often been the character that has been used by the franchise as the butt of the joke.
Yeah.
The way the other characters interact with him in like the sort of big multi-hero events, he's the butt of the joke. He's the shit one.
Yeah.
And yet all of a sudden he's like absolutely battering the shit out of this guy that's supposed to be the be-all and end-all for this new direction.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work for me. And I just felt that, I mean, like I said, they're going to explain their way out of it because they can.
Yeah,
there's probably some guy like sat at a typewriter, hasn't slept for like 48 hours, wearing a fedora, panicking, desperately trying to sort of scour the law for some bullshit excuse. But I don't know. I just don't know how it's going to set, because we said that, didn't we?
Yeah.
How is that going to set things up for the future of this franchise?
Yeah,
moving forward, if the villain is beaten by the butt of the joke,
beaten by Deus Ex Machina as well.
Yeah.
Just really, all the ants just go and drag them away. Spoilers. Who cares? Spoilers. It just the handling of him and the way that they took it. I didn't think he was going to die at all. I thought, if anything, it would be more interesting if he won. A little bit of luck at the end of Infinity War. That was one of the more ballsier moves by Marvel, was to just end Infinity War on such a fucking downer. I was like, okay, I'm excited for the next one now, but not because you've shown me a teaser trailer in the form of a post-credit scene, but because there's something genuinely tragic that's happened. I thought they were going to do that again, and they didn't. They got rid of him. I was like, oh, so there's a conclusion to this guy's story already. Why? What are you doing? And I don't know.
Strange. Rudd's okay. I mean, you know...
coasting a bit, maybe?
I think so. I think... Do you know what? I'm beginning to think that a lot of these long-standing characters are doing that. I think they're totally fucking coasting, man.
Oh, I don't blame them, because the contracts they're sort of bound to are ridiculous.
Because you get the impression with all of them, like, it started off really fucking exciting.
Yeah.
I think with the exception of, like, Tony Stark, that's his real name. Robert Downey Jr., like, obviously he was the poster boy of the whole franchise, so I think he had that boundless enthusiasm for a character that essentially saved his career. But I think if you look at the others, like, I don't know, like, they just seem a bit more, get to be progressively more and more tired as it goes on, particularly after Endgame. Like, you've got, like, Thor. I mean, I thought Love and Thunder was pretty poo. For various reasons, but I think everyone just seemed really disinterested in what was going on. I don't know. I think people were just sort of phoning it in at this point. I don't know. Maybe I'm just sort of deliberately perceiving it as that to suit my sort of growingly negative view, or my growing negative view on the franchise. But
they're just sick of Atlanta. I bet they're fucking shooting in Atlanta. All of them are shot in a soundstage in Atlanta, and they just, I imagine having to fly back there and be like, all right, next one. It's like. It's like going to work in a factory.
Yeah. I don't know. It's strange. Evangeline Lilly. I mean, it's funny. They've called two films Ant-Man and the Wasp, and she has next to no character development in both films.
Yeah, it's weird that. I was confused as to why they called the second one Ant-Man and the Wasp, and she doesn't get given much to do. No. Neither does Michelle Pfeiffer, actually.
She's just an exposition device, isn't she?
Big time.
We were talking about that again. We were saying, weren't we, that Marvel has this track record of like getting in these actors that aren't obviously the main characters, but these big, prestigious actors, and just using them purely to just drop exposition onto the audience and then dying or disappearing. Or
Bill Murray in this film, a classic example.
Benicio del Toro in Guardians. You know, like these like reputable faces that just turn up, get a check,
get a bit of applause from
talk about the law for a bit and then die or fuck off somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's weird. Strange film. I think it's. I'm interested to see where they go from here, because Marvel have struggled since the end of the sort of definitive arc.
A lot of people didn't like Black
definitive.
Widow and that, you know.
Yeah, Black Widow wasn't great, was it? I felt like a missed opportunity to do something interesting there.
Yeah, me too.
And they sort of like frittered over like really boring, uninteresting character dynamics and relationships when they could have done. I don't know. I felt like there's like you could have made like a fucking spy movie. You know what I mean? Like a proper spy movie. Obviously, it was never going to be a proper spy movie because it's a fucking Marvel movie. But at least they could have tried.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love and Thunder, not great. Taika Waititi's style is grating. Is becoming grating. We've spoke about this a few times, haven't we?
We have, yeah. But no, it's lost its charm. It's been without charm for some time now, I think. And I didn't even really get on with the what was the other Thor film he did? Thor, the third one.
Ragnarok.
Thor Ragnarok. I didn't even. I turned off after 20 minutes, which is weird because a lot of people loved it. And yeah, by that point, I was just like, I'm not getting the jokes really. I thought it was really tiresome.
Yeah, I think too much of anything is a problem, and I think his style is one of those things. If overindulged upon, is a problem, and he's in fucking everything. He's literally in fucking everything. He's directing everything. He's in everything.
Yeah,
and I don't know. Like, I mean, it just sounds like we're sort of ragging on him. I don't really have any. I liked his earlier stuff. I wasn't wild for it, but I liked it.
People are still seeing him for his humble beginnings.
Yes.
And his first film was so sincere and humble.
Yes.
That he kind of earned a free pass for a long time. And actually, it seemed like it might have been a bit of a one-off.
Yeah.
Hunt for the Wilder People, I'm talking about. Since then, it's been big, brash, and a bit confusing for me.
Yeah. Black Panther 2, I think it was bold to open the story about the loss of Chadwick Boseman.
Yes.
But again, I don't think, just didn't really feel that after that it had much else to offer.
Eternals is notable for its failure.
Flop. Yeah. And that's a really sad, I think that's probably the saddest film of the lot, I think, because Marvel were like, right, we've finished this arc. We're going to try and silence the people that say we won't diversify our portfolio.
Yeah,
they get Chloe Zhao in, who's known for these sort of slow-paced narratives about people on the fringes of American society.
Yeah,
and they're going to give a allegedly complete creative control to craft this film about like a new group of super powerful individuals.
Yeah,
and it just. The pacing and all that. I mean,
it's fuel to the fire. That's a real shame. I really wanted it to do well.
Marvel CEO is going to look at that and think, well, we're not doing that again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
bring in Peyton Reed.
Yeah,
Ant-Man's fucking shrinking again for a bit.
Yeah,
I don't know.
What was that weird head in it? What was that?
Mordock.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Really nasty to look at. Apparently, he's meant to be nasty to look at. But they got that wrong. Just really bizarre, unpleasant, and the butt of a lot of really stupid, unfunny jokes as well.
Yeah, and again, representative of another thing that Marvel films do. And again, it speaks to right back at the start of this episode. I mean, if you're still fucking listening, thank you. But, we talked about this sort of the way that Disney treats morality and the simplicity. You've got these characters that are hell-bent on slaughtering each other, having like one half-baked, desperately unfunny line of dialogue completely changed their entire moral compass.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. No.
Marvel do that a lot anyway.
Yeah, no.
They tend to have like a character giving a rousing speech to loads of like completely sort of superfluous, sort of like weirdly or poorly designed characters, and then they sort of all of this oppression. In the context of this film, all of these weird characters that are oppressed by Kang in this alternate universe suddenly, after the speech of one person they barely know, suddenly decide to fight this oppressive force. I don't know. I guess it suits Marvel's intentions, but it just narratively unconvincing.
Yeah, I think so.
Losers like us. I guess finally, a whistle-stop tour there through the film and the resulting landscape. But yeah, where do you see it going? And do you think that this continued domination is going to have a negative impact on the wider landscape? Because that's one of the big concerns, isn't it? I think people that throw shade at these films, especially now a lot of the heavy hitters have gone, and Marvel is stumbling to find their feet. And a lot of people are calling for its head.
Yeah.
But they keep going, and to be fair, the popularity seems to still be there.
Yeah, Ant-Man's done quite well.
Yeah,
financially speaking, it's doing
Again,
all right.
What do we fucking know then, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
But, you know, is it going to stop people that go to the cinema? I mean, I don't know if many people go to the cinema sort of thinking, I don't know what I'm going to watch. And they have to pick between Ant-Man and, like, I don't know, like an independent film.
Like Women Talking or something like that.
Yeah, I mean...
Weird choice to choose from.
Yeah.
But someone like me would choose between those two, perhaps, if they were the two things like playing in a cinema.
A spare couple of hours on a Thursday.
Yeah, exactly. I would be like, it would be a toss-up. I think the problem is there's so many of them. There's so many of these films, and they come out so often. They basically ruin the weekend for any other film coming out that weekend, and you could guess it just invites films that otherwise might be seen more widely to kind of disappear into the mud a little bit. And that's troubling to me, because the way films get advertised these days can be quite overwhelming, and then for the sort of smaller independent films that someone like me might be more interested in, I will literally not know they exist until maybe one of you guys mentions them, and that's a shame. I really think I'm going to predict this now. I think Marvel, the MCU, is going to end with a whimper. I do.
Oh wow, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to have a big grand finale. I don't think they're going to have that ending. I think people will eventually stop, and they'll make a few more, and then all of a sudden one of them will make less than $200 million, and that'll be it. Like,
interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because in the defense of superhero films, James Gunn, who is obviously one of the big fucking like poster directors for the superhero genre, compared the superhero genre to the Western. And I guess it was in conceit. And I don't necessarily agree with that in the sense of the superhero the MCU is sprawling and interconnected in the way that Westerns aren't.
Yeah.
Which I think is a notable enough difference to put distance between the comparison.
Okay.
However, it must have been strange in the 30s and 40s, people like John Wayne ever envisioning this idea that the Western wouldn't be popular.
Yeah.
And eventually it will not be popular, and Marvel films won't be. And I think the way Westerns adapted was that they became self-reflective and even self-critical, not just of the genre but the ideals that the genre's upheld. So maybe Marvel will go that way. Maybe they'll become like self-critical and sort of
genuinely self-critical.
Yeah.
Not just that stupid humour kind of. Like actually reflective. That'd be really interesting.
Oh my god, there's I'm finding aliens now.
Fuck
off.
Not like that. Do it properly.
Fuck off.
I was just weirdly Red Dead Redemption popped into my head. Like, that's the way the Western went eventually. It's like a really interesting comment on the end, the end of an era, the end of a time. Yeah. If you think about films like, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, which is quite early, in the sort of decline of the Western, but then to films like The Wild Bunch, in the sense that they started to critique the heroism or the ideas that every cowboy was a hero. These weren't nice people necessarily. No. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see where it goes. I think that it's really a really complicated thing, and it's a bit of a shame that we've decided to discuss this so near the end of the podcast. I'm already aware that this has probably gone on for fucking ages. That's right.
So sorry about that. But I think that the superhero genre undoubtedly helped to keep cinema alive.
Yeah.
In a way that few genres probably could have done.
Yeah.
And indeed, Disney's ownership of everything, on the popularity of all of their sort of strongest assets, has kept cinema going in one sense.
Yeah.
But in the other sense, this idea the money trickles down to fund smaller projects, I'm not convinced by that.
Definitely not in the case of Disney. They wouldn't. I don't think they've got a dreadful track record of original content. Although, like I said earlier, all they do is harvest other intellectual property.
Yeah.
That has either lapsed into the public domain or is just about cheap enough. Which in the context of Disney isn't that cheap.
No, exactly.
But they can afford it, and that's the way they do things. They harvest. They don't really. I don't think they really create that much. They're just harvesters.
Yeah, it's certainly from the boardroom sense, in the boardroom. Yeah, yeah, and I also think that it's it takes the space away from other films, as we said in the release schedule, and people's mind is consumed by these films. I'd be interested to see what happens when that stops happening. What happens next? I guess time will only tell. To end on a shit statement.
Hopefully it's a boom or bust situation, so when they get bust, the others will boom. So we'll get more like Donnie Darkos and stuff.
Maybe.
Which cost 1 million, so you could have made 200 Donnie Darkos with the money that it cost to make Ant-Man. Anyway, sorry.
Just make the same film 200 times.
Yeah, that'd be great. I love it.
Yeah. Right, well, thank you for sticking with us for that one. It's a longie, but...
yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Questing the cinematic void.
Okay, so that was a long one.
It was the longest to date,
I think so, yeah. I mean, Alfie's not here now, so he can't sort of rein us in.
No, yeah, that was
really
short.
That.
Yeah, it was
like we don't even, I'm not even that negatively, I just mean he's really good at keeping discussions lean.
Yeah, keep the ball rolling.
Yeah, we just wax on and just in some sort of rudderless manner. Yes, but anyway, thank you for getting to this point. Thank you for listening as always. Next week, we are not going to discuss a film in particular. We're going to go for an episode centered on another topic. Yeah. A lot of really nice feedback from people about our last episode regarding nostalgia, so it feels like a nice time to do that.
Okay.
The topic we're going to discuss is existentialism in cinema. That sounds lofty, doesn't it?
It does.
We sort of need to sort of pull back some discourse gravitas after spending an hour and a half talking about superhero films.
Yeah.
But we're going to be talking about how these feelings of uncertainty and the great questions as to the meaning of our existence and how this clashes awkwardly with the throngs of the modern world. And how that is within a lot of us, and how that is shared in lots of the characters and films and narratives that have perhaps helped shape that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Can't wait.
Yeah, neither can I. In the meantime, see you later.
See you later.
Love you lots. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.